Okay, so we're going to have a discussion today with Fanatic Thomist on the topic of distinctions in God, the processions or generation and so forth, the energies, what his views are, what our views are. So now that we're recording, I'll let him go ahead and make his points.
Yeah. So, hi everyone, I'm Fanatic Thomist. You guys already know me from Twitter. My ad is @Scholastic. So the reason I agreed to do this discussion with Jay is because it's so hard to do a discussion on Twitter with limited characters. Yeah. So it's better to have a VC chat. So anyways, I'm a Thomist, and I take classical Thomist position on divine attributes, divine essence, and the distinction of persons and essence. So my position is that there is a minor ritual distinction between the divine attributes, the divine essence, and between the persons and the divine essence. However, there is a major real distinction between the divine persons themselves. So the Father is really distinct from the Son by the virtue of the real production as begetter to the begotten, and the same applies to the Spirit, aspirated or aspirated. Now, the way we hash out this distinction is that the minor ritual distinction is a logical distinction or rational distinction. It's called distinctio rationis. But this distinction is not purely mental. So there's a difference between a purely mental distinction and a ritual distinction. The purely mental distinction is only on the part of our intellect, whereas the ritual distinction is both on the part of our intellect and on the part of the thing itself, insofar as the thing itself, in its richness, has the virtue or power. That's why it's called a virtual distinction. It has a power to present itself to the human mind through different aspects. So an example of this would be rationality and animality. So rationality and animality are not really distinct, because man is rational and animal by one and the same entity. But just because you have animality, it doesn't mean that you have rationality. So you can have one without the other, but the converse does not hold true. Now, it's called a major ritual distinction because you have animality and you have rationality, but animality does not include rationality necessarily. There's another kind of distinction called minor ritual distinction. This is called minor ritual distinction because it's not after the manner of excluding and excluded like rational or animal, but implicit and explicit, insofar as concept of attributes implicitly include each other. So we can give the example of transcendentals. Each of them implicitly include the other. So for example, truth and being, ens veritas, those implicitly include each other. And this is the kind of distinction that we posit between the divine attributes and the divine essence, and among the attributes themselves, and between the persons and the essence. So this twofold foundation is first on the part of the thing itself, insofar as the divine essence, in its supreme eminence and simplicity, possesses all these perfections, not as really distinct attributes, but as one. So God is one, and God is powerful, and God is knowing, and God is willing by one and the same thing, which is the divine essence. But since the objective formal concepts of these attributes differ, it has a foundation in the thing itself. But that foundation is potential, and it's looking towards the mind to present itself, or in other words, to impose itself upon that mind. And the second foundation is the foundation on the part of our intellect. So when we actually consider the object, that thing which has the virtue or power to present itself, that actually presents itself, and now mind captures that distinction. And so the first foundation is in the thing itself, and in the case of God, the divine essence. And the second foundation is on the part of our intellect, which is unable to grasp a single simple entity by one concept, so it has to consider it by various concepts. I think that's enough.
Yeah, I have a question on that. So when you were describing the minor virtual, and you said that the foundation in regard to the attributes in the thing itself, that it really is some type of distinction that looks to impose itself on our minds. And but I'm curious, what exactly is the nature of the distinction itself in your view?
Nature of the distinction, you mean whether this is real or
like between, say, providence and divine glory?
Oh, okay. So between the providence and divine glory, there exists a minor virtual distinction.
Right.
But yeah, which has a foundation in the thing itself. But there is a distinction in God which has no foundation, and that's the distinction of God's faculty and action. So, for example, God's knowledge and God's act of knowing have are only purely mentally distinct, whereas God's knowledge and will are minor.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be required by actus purus, right?
Yeah, because we don't believe that God has. So we humans have the power. I can punch. Yeah.
So we agree. I mean, I understand that your position holds that. Let's go back though to that minor virtual, because what I'm trying to understand from you is what exactly you said. There is a foundation in the thing itself.
Yeah.
And you listed two things. The first thing I heard you say was that it looks to impose that on our minds, and then secondly, our mind captures it. But what is the nature of the distinction, quad distinction, the thing in it? What is that distinction that is in the object?
In the object. So you would say that the real virtual distinction is a real distinction, not in the sense that
minor virtual. Yeah.
I'm describing minor virtual. Minor virtual distinction is a real distinction because it exists in the thing itself.
I know. What is the nature of that distinction?
Yeah. So he's asserting that. I want to know how he knows that. How can he actually say these things? Right. I know that's the Thomist position. We understand that the attributes are minor virtual distinctions.
I'm going to explain that. It's real distinction in the thing itself, but it's not real as having diverse realities contained in it. But
yeah, which we already know. So he's again just stating the Thomist position that in God, providence, glory, and love are not actually distinct. They're only distinct in our conception.
So it's not okay. So it's not a diverse reality. So it's not.
Yeah, it's one and the same reality. Right. Yeah, of course. In your terminology.
So minor virtual is essentially still conceptual, but you're saying that it has a basis in the thing itself, but you can't. But what is the basis in the thing itself?
Yeah, the basis is its eminent simplicity, which
okay. So simplicity though is not a basis for distinction.
I'm saying that. Yeah. The basis is in the divine essence, which is simple. It contains all these perfections. But since those perfections have different objective formal concepts, they cannot be identified in concept with each other. So there's a foundation in the thing.
I understand. But you said that in the thing itself, there is a basis for the distinction. But by basis, you're saying the basis is in our head virtually, right?
No. There's a twofold basis in the thing itself and in our mind.
What is the nature of the basis of the distinction in itself, in the thing itself?
I just told you.
What?
It's the power which can present itself to the mind.
Because that's something directed towards us, and you're saying that it's in the thing itself. So this amounts to not any kind of distinction.
Yeah, not a.
So it's not a distinction at all.
No, it's a virtual distinction. I'm telling you that it's not a real distinction in the sense that you have it. Yeah, we agree on that.
That's not real, but in the sense of when we delineate the attributes themselves. I know what the position is. That's what I've always said the position is. So the question then is, would you then say that divine glory is identical to divine providence?
It's identical materially, not formally.
Well, so wait, in God, there's material and formal distinctions?
No, material and formal distinction is basically identity that works in everything. Man and everything.
But hold on, we're talking about in God.
Yeah, in God, of course. So there's a material identity in God, which means that identity in reality. But there's not a formal identity, meaning that
there's a conceptual distinction between divine glory and divine providence, but in reality, they're not distinct.
In reality, as a material identity, yes, they're not distinct.
That's what I've been. Yeah. Okay. So are they both?
If you said that, then you're wrong. But you're right. Yeah. Go on.
Are they both eternal?
The providence and glory.
Mm-hmm.
Providence, insofar as it is considered as an act of intellection and volition, yes. Insofar as it's concerned execution, no.
Oh, so God has not actualized all of his capacities.
No, look, God is always in second act. Only thing that begins to exist is the effect.
So he actualizes all capacities.
Meaning that he has to.
Meaning that there's no
everything.
distinction between first and second act in God in your view.
What do you mean by first and second act? Because
What Aristotle means, what you just said.
Okay.
God is always you said he's always in second actuality.
Yeah. Okay.
First actuality is the
Sure,
capacity. Second actuality is the actualization of that capacity.
Sure. So first act is active power, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the
Well,
second act
right
is
kind of
action.
right kind of capacity.
Yeah, sure. So the second act is action.
Right.
Or actualization of that power, right?
Pure act.
So we would say that, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I'm glad that we agree that pure act means God is always in second act.
Right. We agree there.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not my position, but that's what
I know.
That's what I understand the Thomist position to be. So there's no unactualized capacities in God, right?
Yeah.
Because he would be imperfect on your system.
Yeah.
Okay. So divine providence is not eternally actualized, or is it?
Insofar as it is an entitative act, it's always eternal. Insofar as there's an execution of the effect, no.
Oh, how can you have the action of divine providence, but there's no execution of that act?
Sure. So let me give you an example of creation, which will make it easier. So we have creation. We believe that creation, considered as an act, is eternal. So God never began to create.
That's not true.
Yeah. No, I'm saying my position.
Right. And I'm saying that that's not biblical theology. Because I'm saying that if you were consistent with that, it would lead to eternal creation. It would lead to the origins position.
Okay, you can't think that, and I'm disagreeing. I'm just laying out my position. I thought we were here to lay out our positions.
I'm listening.
Okay, so creative action, considered as an action, is eternal. Considered in its termination.
Creative action in God.
That's not eternal.
Okay, how does God act to create, but it doesn't eternally affect that action?
Yeah, sure. So because God's a volitional agent, and volitional agent determines not only the conditions of the effect, but also its time. So God from all eternity wills that this effect takes place, like, let's say, in 2000.
Yeah, but that's not answering the question. That's just stating the difference between eternity and time, and that you think that there's cause and effect. I'm asking how it's possible in the metaphysical scheme to be consistent, to say that there's an eternal realization of providence that doesn't have an eternal corresponding, what corresponds to that.
No, this is what you're confusing. Realization insofar as
I know you make that distinction, but it doesn't, because now providence doesn't make any sense, because you've equated providence with divine glory and all these other attributes.
Okay, so you think that God didn't always have a plan before creating?
The plan is not identical to the execution. In your system, it is.
Exactly. It's not. I'm saying that it's not. Execution.
Yeah, but that's why you need a distinction between essence and energy.
No, it's a distinction of action and effect. Not action.
The action, because you've already defined the action of divine providence and creation as eternal. Therefore, the effect must be eternal.
No. Consider it as an act, not as an effect. There's a distinction.
I'm saying that's inconsistent. The action, how does God eternally act to create, but there's not an eternal corresponding effect of that?
Okay, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is God's essence necessary?
Yeah, God's essence is necessary.
Okay. Are the other attributes necessary?
Every one of attributes are necessary.
So creating is necessary.
Considered as an act on the part of God, we call it entitatively necessary. Permanently, it's free.
That's origins. That's origins.
No.
Yes, it is.
Allow me to explain why.
All you do is interject a distinction.
No,
the distinction is inconsistent.
Because that's not. If you don't want to hear our position, then why are you?
No, I understand that's the Thomist position. I've always understood that. When I left it, I understood that's the position, and I'm saying that's inconsistent. You're just saying that. You're just saying, but the effect is created. You have a created effect of an eternal action.
Yeah.
The action should just be, the effect should be as eternal as the act.
No.
Otherwise, the words creating and providence mean nothing. They don't make any sense. They don't have any meaning.
No, that only follows if the action. You have to go?
No.
Okay. That only yeah, I agree that if there's an eternal action, there has to be an eternal effect if the action is transient. But we don't believe that creation is a transient action, but an immanent action. So because the terminus of the immanent action remains in the terminus of the imminent action is an intrinsic action and there's no need for the effect to be positive in imminent action, you don't need to have an eternal effect. In the case of transient action, because transient action necessarily proceeds from the agent to the patient. So if there's a transient action,
now you've introduced a new distinction into God, right?
Yeah, of course.
So there's transient acts and there's eternal acts. What are transient acts?
No. We believe that God's action. So first, let me define.
What's a transient act in God?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to explain it. So the eminent action, as Aristotle explains in Metaphysics, Book 9, Chapter 8, the eminent action is an action whose terminus is in the agent. He gives the example of act of knowing and willing. When you know something, the act of knowing is in you, and when you will something, the act of willing is in you. Whereas there's a transient action which is not in you, but in the thing that is acted upon. So, for example, if you build a house,
but the action of creating is not a transient. All you're doing is inventing distinctions that don't answer the question. You're just saying, oh, well, there's another distinction. There's another distinction. But the distinctions are inconsistent with what you're saying. So it's just, all you're doing.
They're not inconsistent. If you let me lay out my position, they're not inconsistent.
Laying out your position is just stating what you think is the case. That doesn't make it consistent because it's not answering the objection.
No, I'm answering why it is consistent.
But it's just inventing a new it's a scholastic distinction to say, oh, well, the problem is resolved by saying that there's two different types of acts. And all it's doing is restating by saying there's a transitive versus a non-transitive act. It's restating the very original question, which was, how is the action of God, which is eternal, directed towards creation, not affecting eternal creation? And you're saying, well, because there's transitive acts and there's imminent acts, right?
That's what I'm trying to explain. And
that distinction is just another kicking the can down the road. It doesn't answer the objection. You're saying you can invent these distinctions all day long, but they don't answer the objection.
They do.
No, they don't. It's adding on new distinctions in the system.
Okay. So
if you just add another distinction, how does that answer the question?
I'm trying to answer, and you're just cutting me up.
But just stating the system, you don't understand. No, it's not. Thomas, you guys think that stating your system is an argument. The system, you don't understand. No, it's not. Thomas, you guys think that stating your system. We're almost done.
No, I'm not stating my system. I'm proving it. And all you have.
You're not proving it other than stating.
Yes, I am. No, I'm proving it, and you're saying, "Oh, you don't have a response," and the
proof is just stating new distinctions that don't answer the objection.
It does answer the question. How? I'm telling you, you're not letting me.
I'm letting you talk. You've talked all this time.
No, every time I speak, you say, "Oh, that's a new distinction." Let's just
because it's you think that laying out a position is an argument. That's not what an argument is.
Yeah, but if I don't lay out my position, how are you going to know what my response is?
When are you going to address the objection? Because I've asked you the same question like 4 times, and you just keep.
I did answer your question. I said from an eternal action. An eternal effect follows.
It's begging the question. It's begging the question. You're just moving the can back a step by introducing a new distinction.
No. Yes, of course, because
but look, each one of the distinctions just restates the divide between God and world, cause and effect. It's not addressing the objection.
Yes, I'm addressing the objection.
No, you're not. Stating your position is not addressing the objection.
Jay. If an action
my name, just address the argument.
Okay, what should I call you?
You don't have to repeat my name. Just address the argument.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm saying that from an eternal action, an eternal effect follows if the action is formally transient.
I'm saying that distinction is an ad hoc distinction that doesn't address.
No, it's not ad hoc.
It is.
Okay, let me give you an example. Suppose that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're punching a wall and wall getting punched are simultaneous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's an example of a transient action.
Yes.
So the cause and the effect are simultaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then there's an action called imminent action, such as act of willing. You can will to build a house like now, but you can actually build it like 2 years later. So the effect doesn't have to follow just because you have an action in mind. Just because you want to build a house, that doesn't mean you're actually going to build
God doesn't work as an analogy to God because God is pure.
It does.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, because that would mean
that your argument that you just gave there is based on first act and second act.
No.
Yes, it is.
Hold on. First
Listen,
act.
do you want me to make, look, I understand your position. So let me put it this way.
I don't think
Let me ask you a question. Are there worlds that God could have created that he didn't?
Yeah, of course.
So not every potentiality is actualized, right?
Yeah, because those are secondary objects. They're not on the part of God's act, which is entitative.
Well, hold on. In terms of divine ideas, it doesn't matter because doesn't God possess in the divine essence all the ideas of all the possible worlds?
Sure.
Okay. Did he actualize all the possible worlds?
No, because the divine.
Then there's capacities and potentia in God.
No.
It should follow, but you're not consistent. That's the point.
No. It actually does not follow.
Why?
Because the divine will. Yeah, I'm explaining. Because all of those possible worlds that you call, those are all considered as secondary objects of the divine volition. Now, since will is a determining power.
Hold on. This is inconsistent, though. I understand. Yes, it is. I understand that you believe.
I mean, every time I explain something.
Because I already know these positions. I've had this debate for like.
No. I don't think you do. And every time I ask,
I do understand the
it's
position.
inconsistent without giving any arguments why it is inconsistent.
I'm gonna give.
You just say, "Oh, it's inconsistent."
That's bullshit, dude.
Okay.
You want to just cut this off? We won't talk.
Why are
conversation.
Why are you insulting me?